Yeah, here we go. Fine.
Okay, thank you very much. Góðan daginn, góð hlustendur. Ég er komin með mjög merkilegan gest hjá mér og ég ætla bara að svissa strax yfir í ensku. I got a very special guest with me. His name is Dr. Aseem Malhotra. He is a highly esteemed award-winning consultant, cardiologist based on the HUM2N Clinic, London. He is globally regarded specialist when it comes to diagnosing, preventing, and managing heart disease. I found this about you online, so maybe you have something else.
There's a lot, but it'll take too long, so don't worry.
So this is enough. Okay. Very welcome to the show of Frettin.is, and thank you for taking the time to join us and tell us a little bit about the conference yesterday. We went to the conference. I was there, and you had a very, very good speech and a very awakening. And first, I want to ask you about what you said in the beginning. Fair and willful blindness happen to people, even intelligent people, and they turned a blind for the truth in order to feel safe. Can you explain this a little bit for the audience?
Yeah, so I think certainly early on in the pandemic, many of us were in a state of uncertainty, lack of information, etc., and that obviously drives up stress and a huge amount of fear. Certainly, whether it was deliberate or whether it was just a natural part of authorities not really being fully aware of how dangerous this virus was. That definitely had an impact on people's, on the population. And psychologically, when you're in a state of fear, then it does inhibit your ability to engage in critical thinking, and it also makes you more compliant. So that's definitely one aspect. And a lot of people still have, I think, an exaggerated fear of COVID. Just to give you the numbers on that, I mean, one survey in America revealed that 50% of Americans thought their risk of being hospitalized with COVID was 50%, 1 in 2 chance, when the actual figure was less than 1%, certainly for everybody over the, under the age of 60. And that is during the most lethal strain. So that's an example of how there was an exaggerated fear. And the second psychological barrier to the truth is willful blindness. So this is when people turn a blind eye to the truth in order to feel safe, avoid conflict, reduce anxiety, and to protect prestige. So, with everything that's happened in the last few years, and in the movement, the growing vocal minority of people who are calling out a lot of excesses of big pharma and how authorities got things very, very wrong in their management of the pandemic, there needs to be an understanding that the main barriers to the truth are psychological first and foremost, and we need to accept that and understand that. And even very, very intelligent people, we've got to understand that we are all human, and even the most intelligent people act emotionally, and everyone has a different perception and different amount of fear, and of course that will drive the behavior. So I think we need to acknowledge that. And in general as well, Margaret, I think one of the things that is important for expanding your mind or listening to other people's perspectives is having an element of humility. And ego is a huge barrier to the truth. So, you have to have a curious mind, you have to be humble. And if you don't have those innate characteristics, or they are a very small part of who you are as a human being, it will limit your ability to expand your mind and gain more knowledge and get to a greater truth.
Yeah, thank you. Good answer. Yeah, this is actually what we saw very much in the beginning. It was like people was afraid, and people can do stupid things when they are afraid, and maybe out of fear they are willing to even get locked inside, and they don't know anything. But when it start to go further and more investigation, and then it was like almost the government and then the health system, they just wanted to keep it this way. They didn't want to see it have.
Yeah, so this is, again, it's interesting. You're absolutely right. So there's one element of a certain amount of information at a certain time and behavior that drives is a result of that information. But you're right. As soon as things evolved quite quickly and we realized the virus wasn't as dangerous as it was made out to be at the very beginning, there should have been a change in public health policy, and there wasn't. And some of it, again, could be just human error. They were still trapped in an element of fear and uncertainty. But I think almost certainly what's happened is there has been a exploitation of the fear by very powerful vested interests, such as Big Pharma, in the sense that they then saw it as an opportunity to make lots of money by developing a vaccine very quickly. And of course, if you look at the Pfizer mRNA vaccine, I mean, that's generated about $100 billion in profit for Pfizer, which is an extraordinary amount of money. I think it may be the most lucrative medical product in the history of medicine, which of course, as we know, has been very, very poor in its efficacy and has come with unprecedented harms. I mean, horrific. It is absolutely, when you know what I know, or other people involved in this space understand that data to the level that needs to be understood. It is beyond comprehension, almost like a nightmare that we are where we are. This should never have been given to a single human being. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind. And I'm speaking from a place of open-mindedness, but the evidence is so overwhelming of the frequency of serious adverse events being much higher than any other vaccine by orders of magnitude, with very little benefit. That was likely, that information should have been known from the beginning, given this was reanalysis of Pfizer and Moderna's original trials. And because the system wasn't transparent to start with, in essence, the drug companies control the data, and they don't allow independent analysis, or the system doesn't really allow independent analysis. If the system had been better and more transparent, we would never have approved this vaccine, and we'd be much better off. And people would say, well, hold on, didn't the vaccine, allow us to come out of lockdown and the death rates reduced? There is an element potentially of that, certainly early on, but there is also a strong argument to be made that the virus had already started to evolve and become less lethal. That's one thing. And there were alternative treatments. There was lifestyle stuff. There was increasing vitamin D. There was possibility, I know it's controversial, but there was possibility of using a very safe drug called ivermectin. And if all these things had been implemented, we would have had the overall net effect on society would have been almost certainly better, which means that we have unnecessarily harmed and killed, countless numbers of people, whether it's, potentially in the millions. This is one of the greatest medical mistakes, potentially corporate crimes, that we will witness in our lifetime. I have no doubt about that. And I can debate anyone, anywhere, anytime on that subject. Anyone.
Yeah, it's kind of unbelievable because in the middle of the pandemic, there was a big news from India. There was this big area. It was like a big city or something in India, like, I don't know, 20.
Uttar Pradesh.
Yeah, we made the article about
State Uttar Pradesh, yeah.
Yeah, and they had ivermectin, and
very little death rates as far as we know. Yes, I mean that's
went from 90% to 0, and they said this is not good enough research. It was kind of
yeah. The people who are saying not good enough research, unfortunately, in general, are not independent. The whole system has been captured by Big Pharma, from the regulators to the academics in universities. There is understandably a growing lack of trust in the medical establishment, because over time they have been increasingly captured by entities. And people need to understand that the primary legal obligation, this is why the law needs to be changed for drug companies to make profit, not to give you the best treatment. But they are pathological in the way that they approach making money. Their business model is fraud. It has been for decades. This is not conspiracy. This is fact, cold hard fact. And only when people realize that will they understand that that they can't completely have faith and trust in the medical establishment, in the World Health Organization. And that's what I'm trying to expose, really, for people to realize that, and then offer solutions moving forward. These are system failures more than they are individual, how should I put it, malevolent behavior. Most of these people, we're all trapped in the system. We're all part of the system. The system over time has become more and more geared towards creating a culture which is self-interested and doesn't think about long-term effects on people's health, and is, you know, rooted in really it's the excesses of corporate capitalism, essentially. This is where we are.
Yeah, the most sad part about this all is actually that so many people have lost belief in the health system. And I, for example, you know, I'm just a reporter in this news media, but we were reporting these articles and research everything. So a lot of people started to contact me and say to me, Margaret, do you know some way to help me, because I don't trust my doctor and I cannot talk to the healthcare people. I try to explain my side effects from the vaccine, but I'm kicked out of the hospital and they're very rude to me. So what can I do? I had so many calls and messages, something like that. So I think that's the worst part of how they have damaged the health system. And like you say, they must change the law, I would guess. And about
Yes, absolutely. And I think intuitively, because people's health has been declining anyway, even pre-pandemic, and got accelerated during the pandemic, there is a responsibility. The medical profession have to give answers. Like, okay, well, what is your role as a doctor? And if medical practice in its totality was doing everything according to the best evidence, why are our patients getting sicker? You know, we as a profession have to take responsibility there. And to understand why there may be this sort of gaslighting behavior or lack of compassion from doctors or acceptance of the issue of the vaccine, obviously there are multifactorial psychological causes as well, because of course they were dogmatic in pushing the vaccine out. And I've been there myself, because I certainly had a blind spot with vaccines, and the COVID vaccine has been very unusual in the way that it's caused so much harm. So I can understand why the doctors are behaving that way. But I think when the evidence emerges and it's so strong, they need to be more humble and keep an open mind and realize information may change and then act on it. Yeah. But one of the problems, Margaret, is the medical profession culturally is hierarchical and obedient. And therefore, they are less likely to speak out, even if they know something's wrong, because they are scared. And when I say obedient, if they're following a medical establishment that is essentially in bed with big pharma, which is what they are across the board, right? And they have been increasingly so over the last few decades. But they don't know that. You know, medical knowledge is under commercial control, but most doctors don't know that. And therefore that explains some of this behavior.
Yeah.
It's not right, but it needs to be discussed. It needs to be exposed, and then we can change things.
Yeah. Also, I heard that there were some bonuses and something else who was involved, who maybe had some doctors you know, they didn't have maybe so intention. They thought that I don't want to lose, you know, so much bonus or this, or maybe get some shame from the big pharma, you know, because there was actually doctors here in Iceland. There was one woman, she came forward and she said, like, you just take vitamin D, and this vaccine are not safe. They are just on experimental state. And actually, they take her license and they start to follow her, the police, and harassing her all around. So this doctor, because of this case, so many doctors, they just they didn't have the guts to say anything.
Yeah, doctors generally, I mean, the way that we have, you know, very disciplined people, very, you know, the people that did really well at school, you know, listen to the teacher, bright. Yeah. But I think intrinsically the nature of most doctors is not to rock the boat, if you like, you know, so that's why this change needs to happen really throughout the profession, and especially at the top of the profession. We've got the wrong leadership as well, because the very people that have gotten to those positions of medical leadership have got there because they have been friendly to industry, because they have to some degree unwittingly you know, surrendered parts of their character, the important parts of their character, sacrificed their soul. You know, this is just a cold hard fact, and that's the problem. Yeah,
that is what the other speaker came into yesterday. But
and plus the other thing is a medical profession as well. You know, my duty is always primarily to patients. Yeah. But the problem is the profession has become very looking at short-term self-interest over patients as well. And that's a big problem. So that, you know, if it's a choice between putting their needs ahead of patient needs, they'll put their own needs ahead of patient needs. And that should never happen in medicine. You shouldn't be a doctor if you're doing that. But the culture has been created where this is much more prevalent now, this sort of behavior.
Yeah. And we thank God for honest doctors like you. We also have some in Iceland, and some a little bit trying to come forward. I know that. So according to the Eurostat, Iceland have the most excess deaths in Europe in the year 2022, about 25%. Also, we have a lot of young people who got the COVID vaccine and also dying from turbo cancer and myocarditis. Is there some way to help these people cleaning the blood from the spike proteins in the vaccines who causes this serious side effects?
Well, so the honest answer is we don't know. What we do know is that the COVID vaccine does seem to cause, in the short term and maybe even longer term, increase what we call chronic inflammation in the body, partly because obviously the spike protein may be active and therefore the immune system is overactivated. And of course, that can then cause tissue damage, autoimmune tissue damage. It can affect the immune system. It's one of the mechanisms for sure, which is probably increasing cancers in younger people. It's definitely a mechanism of what is causing acceleration in heart disease. So it's really, really, really bad, unfortunately. The good news is the antidote to that, as far as we know at the moment, is definitely lifestyle. You know, and COVID itself was a fast pandemic that exploited a slow pandemic of chronic disease. So the people who are most vulnerable to COVID are also the most, in many cases, people most vulnerable to vaccine injuries, which is essentially related to obesity, excess body fat, poor diet, stress, etc. So for me, my primary approach with these people with vaccine injuries or even long COVID that I've managed is to focus and optimize lifestyle, including getting vitamin D levels up. In terms of other issues about so-called detoxification or, you know, neutralizing the effect of ongoing spike protein production in the body, I can only defer to people that I trust who are doing work in this area. And, you know, again, the first rule in medicine is first do no harm. So if there are certain supplements or things that may do some good and don't do any harm, then why not? And the two people that come to mind that I'm aware of, certainly in America, are Dr. Peter McCullough, cardiologist, who has a protocol which involves things like curcumin, nattokinase, bromelain, even ivermectin. And the other is Pierre Corey, who I know has also been to Iceland to speak. So I would normally defer to them, you know, for more, they've had more experience in this area than I have. But I think there is definitely some potential there, but I focus primarily on the lifestyle. I think that needs to be optimized first. Yeah. And then you add in the other supplements, or you do them together, but they're really, really important to get the lifestyle sorted. There's no better time than now to start meditating, to focus on getting rid of ultra processed food and sugar. These are all pro-inflammatory foods. Moderate activity, you know, highlighting the importance of social relationships, social connection, right? All of these things improve your mental health. I think that's the best we can do for now, Margaret. But until the establishment acknowledges that vaccine injuries is now a public health crisis of huge, not small, huge public health crisis, once they acknowledge that, then we can then start dedicating resources and money into more rigorous, extensive research and how we need to manage these. What are the long-term effects? What are the markers? How do people know if they've got ongoing vaccine injury and they're not even aware of it? You know, for example, that we're having these presentations of turbo cancers, but they happen very quickly. So is there any tests that we can do to give us an idea whether that's something that's developing? And then what can you do about it? So this needs to be fully acknowledged. Absolutely.
Yeah, actually, I had one man. He came in interview last year, and he's actually a sportsman. He was in the Olympics swimming team, and he had 2 vaccines, and he had this myocarditis, and he actually thought he was dying. He couldn't, you know, walk upstairs, and he just couldn't breathe, and then he told me he took ivermectin, and he actually it got cured from the ivermectin. So,
amazing.
Yeah, so ivermectin is.
Yeah, ivermectin, I mean, I've not had any personal experience with it, but I've spoken to many doctors that have used it. And what was pleasantly surprising for me is it's even safer than paracetamol.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because I always worry, like, all these drugs and what are the side effects, of course,
Yeah.
but it is one of the safest drugs out there. So if it's going to help these people, then why not?
Yeah.
Give it a go.
Give it a go. Also in the conference, you said your colleague in Britain found out accidentally that the vaccine are causing heart problems in young people increased by 25%. If I understand it right, your colleagues said they could not inform openly about the discovery because they said they could lose some funds, I guess, from big pharma.
Yeah, the lead researcher in that institution, it was his decision, sat down the people allegedly, from what I was told, and said that we can't explore these findings any further because it may affect our funding from big pharma.
That was really shocking to hear. And also you said...
It's very shocking, but it's not surprising. This is a culture, unfortunately, in medicine that has been creeping up over many, many years.
Yeah, and you said you could not participate in such dishonesty, so you informed this information to the public on the TV, if I
Yeah,
it right.
on GB News, yeah, and I think it was November 2021, and then that went viral.
And you got fired.
And it caused a huge backlash for me personally. I mean, I've been subject to medical persecution for the last several years from different organizations that have been trying to undermine my credibility and even call my medical license into question, and that's still ongoing.
Oh.
So it is, but it's part and parcel of just, you know, my conscience is clear. Of course, it's stressful, but I'm not going to stay silent.
Good. And so it's still,
you know, and people think my life is in danger, and you know, many people think that I'm going to get killed, but you only have one life, so you got to make the best of it. So that doesn't worry me either.
Yeah, it's very brave, and it's also.
I don't think it's brave, Margaret. I think it's rational.
It is. It is.
You know, it's not safe to speak the truth, as Jordan Peterson says. Even Matthias Deathmet talked about that, but it's less safe to not speak the truth.
Yeah.
We have to be rational about this as well.
Yeah,
but of course, yes, you have to act from a place of virtue. You have to understand that the most important baseline characteristics for human beings, for development, for progress, for social cohesion is obsessing about, to a degree, about acting from a place of virtue, right? So that means being about honest. You know, there's something called the 7 Nolan Principles in the UK, which was introduced by under the former Prime Minister John Major. There was a Casper question scandal that occurred where it was found out that very wealthy man who was trying to influence policy and questions being asked in Parliament by financial means. And ultimately, there was a committee that was brought together to decide what can we do to mitigate or reduce the harms of this happening again. And they basically came up with something called the 7 Nolan Principles of Public Life, which means all those people whose service and duties to the public, that means doctors, teachers, police, politicians, must adhere to these 7 principles. And those are acting. So it's about selflessness, objectivity, integrity, accountability, honesty, openness, and leadership. And leadership also means calling out when other people in those positions are not adhering to those principles. So I am somebody, and I've written about this extensively in newspapers, I take that on board very seriously, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. Like he came into also the other speaker yesterday, you have to speak the truth so you won't lose your soul. I think it was...
Yeah, absolutely. Because otherwise, actually, if you don't speak the truth, then you end up basically becoming more miserable with time.
Yeah.
And you lose self-respect. So it's actually I look at this also from a rational perspective, not just about doing the right thing. It's irrational to not speak the truth.
Yeah.
Because ultimately it's going to harm you and harm people around you.
Of course. It's just like the karma in life, as we say, maybe.
Yeah.
You mentioned the brave MP Andrew Bridgen and how he's accused of being a part of grooming gang or being a leader of grooming anti-vaxxers.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Andrew Bridgen. So I know of I've had experience in what platforms are necessary to influence policy change. And of course, I've engaged with politicians throughout my career, whether it's been about my sugar advocacy role, whether it's been calling for an investigation into the prescription of statin drugs, whether it's been about dietary guidelines on type 2 diabetes. And in this instance, I felt I needed to engage with politicians on the vaccine. Once I'd published peer-reviewed research, that's my advocacy is almost always related to my own analyses and stuff that's published in medical journals. Because also then I feel confident that I know the information in a strong enough way that I can then be an advocacy for that information. So I gave a talk in Parliament in November 2022, if I remember correctly, invited by one of the other MPs there, and it was an all-party parliamentary group for people with vaccine injuries and about conversation. So they asked me to speak, and I presented my talk, similar to what you heard yesterday. And Andrew Bridgen, who I'd never met, had turned up to the talk, and he took it fully on board, and then he went with it. And after that, he's been a great champion. I think he's the only politician in the UK, certainly the most vocal, who's been a champion calling for a pause on the vaccine and investigation, etc. And he, of course, has suffered backlash too. But when I went on the BBC in January 2022 to talk about statins, I did talk about excess deaths and suggested the vaccine may be playing a role. There was obviously an attack on me as well in the newspapers, and they decided that one of the articles was to put me and Andrew Bridgen together, and that was the title of the Times article. But, you know, I take this as a compliment and a sign of progress, Margaret, because Gandhi said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win.
Yeah.
So if you're getting a backlash in the mainstream, that's a good sign. And that doesn't deter me at all. In fact, I just take that as a compliment. That's a sign of progress.
I agree.
But you have to have a thick skin, because it can be, you know, if you don't have a thick skin, people can be destroyed by some of these articles mentally. You know, they can't handle the smearing, etc. So you've got to rise above it and surrender your ego and look at it dispassionately and see that things are going to keep changing, and you got to keep moving forward.
Yeah, I actually interviewed Mr. Andrew Bridgen last year when we met in Norway. And he told me that when he's having a speech in the council, everybody leaves the room. He's alone there, and this is like a bully behavior. They should actually be ashamed of themselves. This is grown-up people. It's unbelievable. But
this is our leadership. We've allowed this to happen. This is our responsibility too, Margaret. We can't just keep blame and start pointing at politicians. We have the power. The people have the power. If we galvanize and get together, the power is with us. Those people are only in those positions of power because we allow them to. So we can't be apathetic. The real power is with the people. But if we stand together, we can change the system.
Yeah, Frettin.is is probably a very good example, because we started just as a very small media, and now we are getting like very high reading. Like we got now a record of 1.5 million in 2 months.
Amazing.
Reading, and people is getting more and more and want to read more and interested, because they don't get the news anywhere else. So then we can see how this little media are growing, and the other mainstream media who's on the other side.
Yeah, the legacy media is dying. It's dying. They need to get their act together. They're being destroyed. And the more they attack us, the more it actually has a net detrimental effect on them. People are like not accepting their bullshit anymore.
I agree. It's turning around. Yeah. And so you probably noticed that one of the mainstream media, none of the mainstream media or health system appeared on the conference, even though they were invited. What do you say about that? And do you have any?
Well, I'm not aware. One of the organizers said that there were mainstream media there, but I don't know whether we'll find out in the next 24 hours.
We'll find out. Last time we had another conference, they appeared, but they didn't write about it. They just came to spy or something. And but they also invited the health minister, but he did not show up. And
interesting.
Very interesting, because it's like these people, they just...
Well, I met yesterday one of the people who I didn't even know had come to my previous talks and was very complimentary and seemed like a very nice person, Arnar, who is apparently running for the presidency. So he was also there, I understand.
He came there. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not the health minister and not the mainstream...
Yeah, but what do you expect, though? Those people are complicit in this. You know, it takes courage for them to accept they've made a mistake. They need to do that.
Yeah,
but you can understand the psychological behavior. You've been part of this plan. You've rolled out a vaccine. You know, people are very forgiving if people acknowledge that my intention was pure, but there was a mistake. We realize that now. We need to stop this happening again, and we're going to do something about it. That's what they need to do. But actually hiding away is not going to do them any good.
No, and it's okay to you know, to say, you know, okay, I did a mistake, and
I believe this was right and the right thing to do, and now I know that it was wrong. That's it.
that's it. We are not asking them to, I don't know, because it's just a simple thing.
But it's a reflection of character. It takes strong characters for people to do that, and it basically is a reflection that many politicians are not the kind of people that we want leading our countries.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, the last question. Do you think this kind of pandemic, as I call it, can ever happen again? And if so, what advice would you give people and how to be prepared and informed?
Well, I think the most important thing you can do is make your be physically resilient. So, sort your lifestyle out. It's easier said than done because a lot of this is environmentally determined. But whatever agency you have, you need to maximize that to make sure that you are eating a healthy diet. You're not eating lots of sugar. You're not drinking Coca-Cola. These are really important aspects of health, and basically that enhances your immune system. I wrote a book in 2020 actually, called 21-Day Immunity Plan, which became a bestseller because I'd looked in detail about what are the aspects of immunity related to lifestyle that make you resilient to COVID. So that's what you can do on an individual level. But I think right now we need to change the system so that we make sure the right people are in power that we can trust to make the right decisions if and when the next, viral pandemic occurs. This was a mistake. There was probably a lab leak of this virus, and it was just exploited by vested interests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I have the feeling, if it's gonna happen again, people is not gonna get any vaccines and stuff. I think that's
Well, this is another problem. The establishment needs to sort things out because the trust has gone down. There's already a decline in other vaccines being taken up, which isn't good.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a reflection of lack of trust. So yes, we need to restore trust first.
Yeah.
So people need to speak out and not be quiet and sit in their houses while the world around them is burning, especially when they know what they're hearing now.
Yeah.
It's not good enough. It's not good enough. And you can't blame anybody but yourself if things get worse.
Yeah, for sure. So are you going to
That means all of us have a role to play. There's no point complaining. The question is, what are you going to do about it?
For sure. And don't make the same mistakes again.
Yeah.
And are you going to be in the conference in Geneva in the end of May because of the HUM?
Yeah. I'm speaking there. Yeah, I'm speaking.
Great. So I see you there.
Fantastic. We keep moving forward, Margaret.
For sure. And
onwards and upwards.
And we are group, there's small groups all around the world, and it's amazing how these people is connecting and getting together, because we like we say, small things can make big things happen, and I feel that's what's going on now. Yeah,
I'll just finish on a small phrase I use often in my talks for people to think about. Knowledge without action is vanity. Action without knowledge is insanity. But wisdom without courage is fruitless.
Wow, I think this is perfect final words. Thank you so much taking the time for us and join us, and enjoy the best for the rest in Iceland. I hope you enjoyed it here.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah? Lovely hospitality here, absolutely. Beautiful country.
It's your first time or?
Second time. I spoke at the Food Loose conference in 2016, and I became very good friends with your former First Lady, Dorit Musayev.
Oh, really?
Who I speak to regularly as well. So, she's fully aware of what's going on too.
Wow, interesting. Very
All
nice.
right. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Have a nice day.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.